mean, you're not an expert in a thing unless you've done that thing.
Right.
And in this case, it wasn't our specialty. So we had advisors who helped us along the way. But I'll be honest, I felt confused and lost most of the process just because the vocabulary wasn't common to me.
Right. And that literally is the notion of the show.
Yeah.
We had Ian Barkin of Symphony Ventures on the podcast today. Ian's got a really interesting background. So he has seen what it looks like when it gets very big and also started new businesses from scratch. He graduated, I think, from Middlebury College and ultimately got his MBA at the Sloan School at MIT. So obviously a very bright guy, very technology forward, spent some time at PwC early in his career on the technology side, Capgemini, but also started multiple companies and ultimately sold his last venture to Sykes a few years back. And then I think in 2018 and stayed on for a few years and ascended to a C-suite role. So a really interesting dynamic to see sort of building a company from scratch with a couple of partners after spending time in a large business, selling to a really large business, and then staying on and ascending within this larger framework. That business had 55,000 employees. He started it with 0 and grew it to 350 when he sold his business. So again, he knows what it looks like when it was small, when it started, and also when it gets big. A really interesting background. Ian's also an incredible technology thinker. So he started off in robotics and now is really on the AI side. We talked about a lot of the parallels there in sort of the automation side. Really an interesting conversation. We talked about a lot of different areas, but I think what's probably most resonant was his experience during the transaction, post-transaction, and also his views on technology. Hopefully you guys get a lot out of this episode. I certainly did. Welcome to Closing Remarks. I'm your host, Dara Shareef, and we have with us today, Ian Barkin. Ian, introduce yourself, please.
Dara, absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for letting me join you. My name is Ian, as you said. I live here in Tampa, moved here 7 years ago. We'll probably touch on this, but have been a serial entrepreneur and still at it. Love helping enterprises and small and medium businesses figure out AI and geeking out about AI and automation and all of that fun stuff. So that's me. I've worn lots of different hats in my roles, not just founder, but rainmaker, marketer, storyteller, implementer, consultant, etc. So
yeah, we'll cover a lot of that ground today. So again, I really appreciate you coming in. You've seen sort of every angle of this equation. So it's going to be an interesting. And I say equation purposefully because you are a technologist. You got into robotics very early. You're an MIT guy. I'm going to try and stay at your level as much as I can, but I can't promise anything. But so talk about your background from a technology perspective, and then transition if you can into where you started, which was big businesses, right? So which is not necessarily where you think an entrepreneur comes from.
Well, so it's interesting. You get to be the judge if it's interesting, but I pendulum swung back and forth and back and forth. So I started my career at a large organization. It was PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yeah. Just so happens training was here in Tampa.
Yeah.
And then from there went to a smaller strategy consulting, even smaller sort of advisory analyst firm, and then started my own. And so that was my first startup way back in 2000 or something. So small startup with one co-founder. And then pendulum swung back into large organizations again. Right after business school, went into major global services firms. And then swung out again and started another startup. And so I've seen sort of both sides. I know sort of the benefits and the challenges of both sides. And so that was my background. It just so happened, yes, technology, like that first job at PwC, it was ERPs. As exciting as that is, it was helping enterprises to deploy PeopleSoft. I don't want to brag.
I remember.
I helped deploy PeopleSoft. Yeah. And then from there, got fascinated by what became known as Internet of Things, but it was at the time called machine to machine or ubiquitous internet. And so I've always sort of touched technology on the sort of the cutting edge and innovation and trying to figure out how it applies to operations and enterprises. And so what brought us to this last sort of chapter of my career was I went into large firms primarily in outsourcing. So right out of business school, I went to outsourcing companies which were helping organizations tap into global talent
Mm-hmm.
to get work done, which by virtue of that gave them arbitrage, cost savings, but also gave them operational efficiency just because it was a team that knew how to run itself, did it with real rigor and rubrics and dashboards and
Yeah.
frameworks and measurement structures. And it was there that the concept of automation then landed. Ultimately, because if you could outsource it, then it tended not to be core strategic.
Right.
It tended to be routine, mundane, transactional. And those lenses lent themselves to then software automation, replicating and emulating the work that the people did.
Which sounds very familiar to what we're happening right now in terms of AI that we'll get to.
Exactly.
We'll get to, but BPO, so business process outsourcing, is taking things that are not core to the enterprise,
Right.
functions that someone maybe in India or somewhere else off-site can do for you just as effectively and
Yes.
ostensibly not as much money. And
it was an amazing portion of my career. I mean, somewhat simplistically, I think I went into it initially. Two reasons. One, I followed a mentor. So I had somebody who I had known through childhood who was a real titan in the space, who happened to be the head of business development for one of the largest BPOs in the world. And he introduced me to the concept and then welcomed me into the team. And it then kicked off just an incredible journey throughout my career because I got to meet friends and colleagues all over the world because I built teams throughout Latin America, built teams throughout Eastern Europe, throughout India, throughout Asia, because that's where work went. It went to, as you said, the economic element of arbitrage and lower cost was one of the key components. But then you were looking at language, you're looking at time zone, looking at sort of cultural proclivities and strengths. And so we would send work all over the place. And what an amazing privilege to be able to meet folks and build friendships and relationships with teams all over the world. And so that's to me, that's BPO is tapping into just this extraordinary wealth of energy and intelligence and capability in developing economies all over the planet.
And best practices, right? You don't have to be great at everything. You can outsource things that are not core.
That's right. And that tended to be, and you saw that in, as you said, it's not, so it was usually finance and accounting, HR, supply chain logistics, procurement, those things that weren't what defined whatever your business was, and or support. So obviously if you're in front office outsourcing, it's call center. You've got a lot of telecom companies that we would hire people that you can call and scream at. If we worked with a lot of banks, a lot of financial services, like insurance companies, a lot of healthcare companies, and you're right that they felt more comfortable handing non-strategic tasks off, but still really important. And so we had teams doing all of those scopes of work across the planet, which was a great deal of fun and set me up for that next chapter in my career, which is, can we then automate this stuff?
So I want to sort of park there on this pendulum you talked about because it's such a unique background. So I've seen people sort of start with the training of a big business and diagnosing problems and executing on solutions and say, I think I got something.
Yeah.
But the notion of going back and forth is pretty unique because the demands and requirements and cultures of startups versus big businesses that have a lot of support.
Yes.
When you're making decisions at a big business, you've got folks doing a lot of little things you don't have to think about and you maybe never had to think about. So you don't know that they exist.
Yes.
And then now you're kind of the only guy or one of a couple.
Right.
And you have to think of everything.
Yes.
So talk about that.
It's funny. I each path is right for various people. I do, having been in very small companies where you have to do absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I do appreciate how lucky people who are in large organizations are, in so much as they don't need to print their own business cards, book their own flights, make sure that the unemployment insurance is paid in each additional state they happen to hire a person in, because we've got 50 countries in this country. And so there's a complexity there that you inherit that isn't the reason anyone, I think, starts a company, but is
Right.
something you have to put up with when you do. But no, some of the pendulum was some of it was when you out of college, you started a big organization because what do you know? What else would you do? It's a great place to get experience
Right.
and also just to get a salary. The other pendulum probably was because again I came out of business school, so when you come out with a whole new pile of debt and you need to do
Right.
something about it, I actually distinctly remember an entrepreneurship professor at business school who rather bluntly said to the class, "Most of you are going to go just take jobs for the next 3 to 5 years because you got to pay off your debt." And I just thought, man, that's a pretty sort of pretty blunt thing to say,
Yeah.
and yet it was a very reasonable and accurate thing to say that you see a lot of MBAs pursue entrepreneurship once they can,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that if you're tremendously lucky and either you had your business school paid for through one means or another, then yeah, you can take a risk a little sooner. But there's a huge amount of benefit to working at large organizations for multiple reasons. But not only because someone gets your business cards printed for you, but because they're by the nature of them being large, complex organizations, there have to be best practices that they run on and run with. And so it teaches you things like communication
Yeah.
modes, like change management, like communication, just project rigor and tracking and dashboards and metric. All of the things that a big company needs are tremendous underlying fundamental skills to have,
Yeah.
regardless of the size of the thing that you decide to then start and run.
So I was number two at a venture fund for a while when I was younger.
Okay.
And not only did I print my own cards, I had to cut them.
Ooh,
Right. So, and the guy who helped me cut them was the number one in the fund.
that's
Right.
standing.
The
Okay.
gentleman who I learned from,
That's
Walt
funny.
Robb, who was like Jack Welch's right-hand man. But that was our approach. We actually literally printed on heavy cardstock,
Nice.
and then he took one of those choppers
That's
that you have
fun.
and cut them. And I'd have all these cards that were different shapes and sizes, and it was
That makes them special. That adds to their value. It's like a stamp that's misprinted. That's
like a snowflake.
right,
Each one
right.
is a little bit different.
And I think that experience really is so powerful and important because
Yeah.
literally it drives home the point that you really do need to roll up your sleeves and do absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And that's a great gauntlet to have to sort of power through, because it also gives you an appreciation of every layer of an organization as you scale. Because ultimately, if you're successful enough, you can start to accumulate a team of people who then take on some of those tasks. And yet, if you were the one who did, and maybe you weren't handing out cutting the cards, maybe you outsource that to a company in the future, but you at least appreciated all that went into each element of that.
Yeah.
And I think it makes you much more of a player coach, much more of a sort of a cultural leader as well as just an executive, because
Yeah.
you've done it.
You've
So-
had to do every single component. You
Right.
you bring empathy to the table, which is
Exactly.
unique because you've been in their shoes.
Right.
Like sometimes, like today.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, the in shoes thing. I think a lot of who you are is really how you're raised and the stories you're told, and the sort of it derives from the community you grew up in, the parents you have, and so I got that from my father. It was
Mm.
just this strong appreciation of putting yourself in people's shoes
Yeah.
and really seeing it from their perspective, walking a mile in, and so we took that very seriously. I used to when we were an implementation firm, a services firm that worked with a lot of software vendors. I had an initiative that we would work on with our vendors that was called a shoe swap, quite literally, just
Oh,
a
wow.
shoe swap, which was effectively let's see it from each other's point of view, because it's the only way this is going to be a collaborative and useful discussion. Right? You have to see what it is that I'm trying to achieve with my business, and I will put myself in your shoes to see what you're trying to achieve and
Yeah.
do with your business, just so we see where we're coming from. Because I think it makes for a much more productive everything. Partnership planning, negotiation, the structuring of deals and licensing and collaboration.
Yeah.
Shoe swap is pretty integral to doing that in a way that's fair, ideally, but also mutually beneficial and effective.
There's a legendary I Love Lucy episode where they literally trade roles, like Lucy and Ricky trade roles. And I think Fred and Ethel did as well.
Okay.
And they had a much better appreciation for each other afterwards.
Interesting. And that's way back when like role assignments was, yeah, exactly. That's pretty revolutionary. That's cool.
Yeah, I remember that episode. That's one of the ones that you think about. The other one's the assembly line. Right? That's the classic. Everyone's seen the assembly line.
I used the assembly line one recently for a LinkedIn post because the point was effectively that everyone was being told that they need to adopt AI as fast as humanly possible, and so they ultimately the punchline being it's a mess, and you're sort of shoving it in your mouth and hiding it in your hat, and then leadership, who is the one that's top down mandating all of this adoption of AI, comes in and sees a clean assembly line and goes, "Great, let's keep it up," and that's it, and that's right. And meanwhile, there's just chaos going on when the door is closed and behind the scenes. So it's a classic.
So I reference my VC days already. I do it often, probably more so than I should. But back then I was doing a lot of sort of public speaking, and one that I always delivered was the push pull. That's what I called it. So, some businesses, you sort of create this incredible technology in your head, and you sort of push it onto the market to find it's a solution finding a problem.
Right.
And others, it's, hey, I've experienced this problem. And I have this elegant solution. I think it's elegant. Mm-hmm. I think someone's going to pay for it. Let's go put it out in the world. I have a solution to an actual problem.
Right.
Those tend to work out better in my view. I tended to fund those over the other. I'm curious, what was your sort of process to start your first business and then ultimately the second?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
So great job.
See that, Kyle, I can ask a good question.
That's right. I choose to answer this one because it's so good. The others I dismiss and choose to pass.
I get it.
What happened was, so the origins of this, at the time it was called robotic process automation. Mm-hmm. It was the use of software to emulate the work people was doing and to automate workflow. And I was in a business process outsourcing practice. So I was the global head of innovation, which is quite a grand name.
Yeah, it's fancy.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a $1 billion revenue, primarily front office call center business. And I was brought in to help find ways to innovate and transform the way that we did the work we did.
Yeah.
And more often than not, in delivery of outsourcing, innovation took the form of continuous improvement. It was usually things like Lean and Kaizen and Six Sigma, and how do you build dashboards and command centers to see see the work that's being done better. But as luck would have it, about a year before I took this new role, the concept of this process automation software landed in our industry. And I thought, that's cool. I want to try to figure out how to play with that and fit it into my life. And so when I became the head of innovation, one of the things I went looking for was an opportunity to test this theory. As luck would have it, we had it was Dell Computers was the client, and we were doing order management for them. So it was the shipping of computers out to individuals, to schools, to businesses, to government. And there was always friction in those orders. Something just wouldn't work and humans had to step in. But the order itself, the process, and even the friction was relatively definable. So you could understand why it happened, the systems where it happened, the data that came in. So long story short, we were able to apply process automation to that scope of work and improve on it. What happened after that really was a whirlwind, but shortly thereafter, we stood up the first real center of excellence in the BPO industry in this concept. We had 50 people out of Chennai doing it. It caught a lot of attention, and so all of a sudden, a lot of people wanted to talk to me and my colleague, who ultimately became my co-founder. Okay. The somewhat abridged version we tell is they said, I don't necessarily want to hear about your cheaper people. I want to hear about your robots.
Okay.
And so it didn't take too many times for that to actually resonate in us to realize maybe we've got something here. And so to your point, it was pulled in so much as they wanted this from us. They wanted to know what we had been learning really at the coal face, as the Brits say.
Sure. They say it all the time in our business. Right. I hear that from Stephen every day.
Right. And so that's what that's where we were. We were in the trenches at the coalface, actually testing this out, seeing where it worked, seeing where it didn't. And what made us so good is my partner and his approach to this, which was he is he's never enamored by shiny new things.
Okay.
He's very hard to impress. What he is absolutely obsessed with foundation, fundamentals, and process. And so that's what made us so good is we went right back to the roots of what are they doing? What are they trying to achieve?
Yeah.
What's getting in the way of it? And how do we re-engineer it? And now how can technology contribute to that trajectory? And so long story short, it worked. We got a lot of recognition from the industry analysts, from the vendors, and then we took a risk, took a leap, and started our own company to then take this out to work with other organizations. And a lot of luck, some really good timing, and tenacity, and an incredible team told the rest of the story. So that's it. That's how we.
So talk about that build process, building that business out, and what that took from you.
Yeah. So we were lucky in so much as we had a lot of shoulders on which to sort of bear the weight. We had, so there was my co-founder that I talked about, and there were two other co-founders as well. So we had four folks, all of whom worked together at a prior company, so we knew each other. And I've been told this by other entrepreneurs in the past is be very careful about who you go into business with, because it is a marriage, but more so.
Yeah,
you spend every ounce of time with each other. You need to be able to trust each other. You really need to be able to back one another up, to support each other, to fill in each other's gaps.
And most of it's under tension.
And it's all exactly, pushing rocks uphill and facing tension and friction and headwinds. And so who do you want to go into that adventure with? And we were lucky. I just because of the relationship we had with these three other co-founders, the four of us launched this thing, and it was August 2014.
Did you guys all have unique skills that you brought to the table? You were very thoughtful in how you constructed it and how the lines that you drew and the sort of functional ownership and all of that.
So sure, I will take credit for being absolutely thoughtful and specific about our. I think it just so happened that we did have complementary skills, and to some degree we sort of saw it. So I suppose let's give ourselves some credit for being thoughtful. But one of the individuals was older than us. He had been an executive. We had all worked for him.
Okay.
So he brought the gray hair. He brought the experience. He brought the relationships. And we had a sales guy. So he brought that first he is hilarious. He's bold. He's the kind of guy who can say things to you that if someone else said the same thing, you'd be annoyed, but he does it in a way that you just end up liking him more.
Oh,
and so
what a skill.
Yeah, right. So he was a star in that regard and was tremendous. We all had big enterprise experience, big enterprise sales experience, solutioning experience. So that was across the board helpful. Then my co-founder that I referenced was the process and really the technology and the operations guy. And then there's me. And who knows what I brought to the table. Probably my specialties for the group were mostly around storytelling, marketing, branding, messaging.
Yeah.
And so we were able to get the word out, and we became rather quickly the most recognized firm, boutique specialist in that space doing what we did. And so as a result, shortly after launching, we became a Gartner Cool vendor. We got other recognitions from other vendors or other analyst firms that validates your existence and says to others that you're worth spending time with and hearing from. And together, we again had four sets of shoulders on which to rest the sometimes crippling weight of a startup.
Yeah.
And then again, it was a combination of hard work, good timing, and luck that we were then able to land some very large enterprise clients and just get going. And as a result, from August 2014 to November 2018, so it was really only a 4-year sprint that we went from an idea and a bold leap to roughly 350 professionals and an exit.
Wow.
And again, a lot of that is just the timing. We were in the right place at the right time with the market, really interested in what it is that we did, and we did a good job of doing it. So enabled us to land clients, I suppose. So it was an amazing adventure.
So storytelling, and I've said it on this podcast, is a superpower.
Yes.
I tell my kids, there's no skill you can acquire in life that is as valuable as your ability to convince and compel.
Yes.
To tell a story.
Yes.
It's no matter what business you're in, what the kind of the economy you're in, whatever it doesn't matter. My oldest wants to be a teacher. My youngest wants to be an architect. Storytelling matters in every single business, and it is an absolute superpower. And being the smartest in the room, being the most functionally technical, valuable, but not as valuable as your ability to convince and compel with your incredible storytelling skill.
Couldn't agree more. And ultimately, especially in the day and age that we're in right now, where so much of the trend is really defined by complexity, and you can geek out and talk about frontier models and tokens and computational petaflops, and there is no faster way to put someone to sleep or lose their attention or just seem like kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
That you're showing off things that you know, and it doesn't win the trust and the relationship you need to actually work with someone. And so I could not agree more. And frankly, what's helped me throughout my career, I think, is that I need those stories personally.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I need analogies personally to actually understand this stuff because I don't. It's complex, and I don't fully appreciate it myself. But I do know what works, and I do know the struggles that especially owners, executives, operators of businesses of any size are facing right now. And that's where you build rapport is with those stories. So absolutely.
Especially now. So the technology is being compressed, right? It's making all this functional knowledge. It's still valuable.
Yes.
But we have access to it. If we prompt the robots effectively, we can access a lot of this information.
Yes.
And it comes down to your ability to tell a story, because that's the part the robots can't quite do.
Exactly. And I think that too, it's being a conscientious and thoughtful storyteller, because you're right, because you can prompt a whole bunch of slop into existence.
Sure.
And the one thing about us as social animals since the beginning of our existence was we conveyed information through stories. We conveyed information to each other. And I think we really do have a lizard brain that senses when what you're telling me is genuine and honest or not. And so when you read some sort of substantial documents that a Claude or a ChatGPT or something else produces, part of you just knows that that's not a genuine piece of story or content, and to some degree it doesn't matter if it's a summary of a report. If it's data that's being relayed, that's fine. But if it's to actually get a point across, I mean, I've suffered this, and my co-founder has suffered this more than I have, because I'll hand him things and say look at this, and he'll start reading it and then say, is this you used an AI to develop this? And I said, yes. And he said, did you read it first? Because I don't want to be the first person reading this.
Right.
And so he has trained me to aggressively edit, and it helps me to generate ideas, but it shouldn't be the final deliverable, because it is not a good storyteller. Humans still really need to be the messenger in most of these stories.
I agree, and especially, I'm going to say it again, especially thought leadership.
Yes.
I see on LinkedIn these people who put themselves out as thought leaders, and it is so clearly AI. Yep. And I'm 53 years old. It isn't like I am at the frontier of this stuff. I can tell so quickly, because a lot of it's so lazy, like the parallel structures, thought leadership isn't this, it's this. It's like, well, no one said it was that, but that sort of counter narrative, that structure, the M dashes, the size of these little like short sentences that are like
who knew
so
that
choppy.
I've had discussions with friends of mine who are writers and who went to school for literature and who feel so bad for the poor M dash.
Oh, I know.
They actually used them, and now you cannot because you are instantly deemed as AI. The other thing is, and I think you really can. You can mass produce content. You can mass produce these stories, which is driving me back to it's. This is not a perfect parallel, but the whole sort of slow food movement where you went from sort of fast food and to actually cooking your own and going to like locally sourced. I think there's an element or a return to sort of slow content where I kind of want to see something you made. I want to make stuff again. I want to go back and do terrible jobs of editing videos just because it's fun. Right? I mean, when I walked into the studio, I geeked out about your equipment because I've got cameras like this at home, not as many as you do. You were clear.
Joking. I was joking.
You pointed out how many more cameras you have than me. Which
again, it's not a competition, but if it were, I think we know who to want.
It felt like a competition. But I genuinely enjoy that element. So having AI synthesize me at a desk, just pumping out material that isn't genuine to me.
Right.
I don't enjoy, and I certainly don't think anyone else would want to see that much slop of me being predictable and structured, as you said.
At least change the color and fonts, please. Like it just don't have the gold and the black.
There we go.
We know it's Claude.
Yeah, that's right. It's and I think that's the lizard brain of you. Just there will be an element of me, of any of us, understanding either you spent time on this or you didn't, which shows either your respect for me or your lack thereof.
That's frankly, that's exactly it. So I get emails like this all the time, and I immediately, it doesn't matter how compelling the first, couple sentences were. If I know it's AI, I'm done.
Right.
I literally said, okay, that tells you how serious you are about this.
Don't even read it. Right. Exactly.
If you're not going to take me seriously, I can't take you seriously.
And so there's that interesting social contract of, you took the time to summarize the discussion we just had, and so I'm going to take the time to read it. But if it is just that you took a transcript and chucked it into Claude, and then it created an email that's 3 times longer than you would have ever written and I would have ever read, then what are we doing here? And then you carry that story forward where, maybe we'll get into this, the whole agentification of work where you don't need people at all. It's just agents creating all that. That is a cold and verbose future in which I think nobody will be reading anything, and no one will be invested or engaged or informed anymore. So
you nailed it. It's the breaking of a social contract.
Yes,
that we've had from the beginning of time.
Right. Yes.
Which it troubles me to no end.
I agree.
So let's get back to the company. So you guys, it didn't take you very long to build it to something that was worth selling. And you decided to make that decision and sell. You're still a relatively young man. You're still younger than me. So
I'm 50. So
that's younger than I. I know I look incredible.
You do look really good.
But no, I'm joking.
And you sound great. We've already covered this. So.
Because the room, this room. If you hear me outside of the room, I sound.
That's true.
It was like
Mickey Mouse. It was weird.
But walk me through what was the sort of the decision-making process to sell a business when you guys are having a good time. You've got a great team. You have 350. What compelled you guys to sell?
It was interesting because if anyone tells you that it worked out the way that they planned, they probably are they're harnessing revisionist history.
Yes.
So when we started, and I remember this, we had a discussion amongst the 4 of us about what it is that we'd want to achieve, like what we're going for. And so we were just guessing at how many years we'd want to be at this before we sold. And if you guess any number about how much you'd want to sell for, that is pure fiction, right? You're just making stuff up. So then we got started. And whenever you get started, just the sheer act of being able to persist and exist the next day is success, right? So we did that. And then about halfway through that journey, so 2.5 years in, we decided that we needed financing to help us to continue to scale and achieve the goals that we had. And so what we did was we went and we raised $4.5 million in funding. So that was the beginning. When anytime you raise funding, you've chosen then a trajectory.
You have.
Your next step is either more funding or even more funding or an exit of some form.
Right.
And so,
As long as it's professional money.
right, exactly. And so, and we locked it. It was a firm out of the UK, and the vernacular is different, venture capital, private equity, or what have you. But it was effectively a PE out of the UK, but it sort of feels more like VC money to me, at least.
Yeah.
And we used that money, some of it wisely, some of it questionable. But then what we were doing actually was we then went out with our bankers to look at what we were going to do next. And our initial instinct was to go raise more money. And so that's what we went out to do. It was just to raise the next round of funding. But in that discussion, you leave yourself open for other options. And so when asked, would you be open to entertaining trade sales? Sure. Let's see what comes. And so then this sojourn began, because we actually we had PEs, US PEs, actually some major US PEs offer us money. And I'll fast forward to the end. We were at the altar with a PE and a trade sale, and we were entertaining what sort of the benefits, pros and cons of each one of them would be. But in that process, we actually almost sold the business several different times, because we had this one large BPO firm that we were really, really close to signing a contract with, and then they themselves were purchased.
Okay.
And they called us on the phone and said, we can't tell you why we need to put this on hold. And we said, well, is it the press release that came out that suggests that perhaps you were being purchased? And they said, well,
No.
all we can say is you're very smart. I'm like, okay, that's not subtle. Thanks.
Yeah.
And so that was that was kiboshed. And so then we were looking at our options, and ultimately what happened was we met an organization, we met the leadership of an organization that we really resonated with.
Okay.
We liked. The CEO just struck us as a genuinely nice guy, and he turned out to be. And I don't know that we ever really finally decided. I don't remember actually what the final decision was of why we went trade sale versus PE. I think some of us wanted to just sort of take money off the table. Some of us, maybe the rigors of entrepreneurship were a little tough, and we wanted to just sort of tuck into a larger organization for a little while.
Yeah.
And so we chose trade sale. And hindsight 2020, it was about 8 months before COVID hit. So, which was the luckiest thing we could have done, because what it did was it took that entire family of professionals and gave them a safe place to continue to have their jobs and to continue to be productive in ways that if we had taken the PE money, I think it would have been a very different reality in the struggles of COVID, when all these services firms were trying to figure out how to survive and keep their teams together. So,
any challenges in the process itself that you had to deal with that might be informative for an audience of business owners and
sure. Yeah, I mean, and some of it, and so much of the thesis behind this show was, we're entrepreneurs for a few reasons. One, because we were specialists at our craft, because we were really bad at measuring risk, and we just decided to jump and do this thing for ourselves. We had experience in big deal sales, selling large deals to large enterprises.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of that, the contractual mechanics and the financial mechanics are very different than cap tables,
right,
and share earnouts and various other dynamics of selling your own business.
Right.
So, you're not an expert in a thing unless you've done that thing.
Right.
And in this case, it wasn't our specialty. So we had advisors who helped us along the way. But I'll be honest, I felt confused and lost most of the process, just because the vocabulary wasn't common to me.
Right. And that literally is the notion of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So structurally, anything you can share in terms of what the deal structure was? You don't have to ascribe any numbers to it.
Ultimately we were at about 16 million revenue when we sold, and we sold for 70 million. And we had that original investor who owned about 20%. So the founder still owned 80%. and the deal was actually it compared to some of the other trade sales that we had, it was actually quite friendly to us in so much as there weren't really restrictive earnouts and expectations of us growing this thing exponentially after the sale. And so it allowed us actually to focus on our craft, to land in the new organization, to really work on contributing to the organization, as well as continuing to grow the scale and the scope of the business externally in the external market. And so that it was a really good ultimate decision for all of us and worked out rather well. So,
and I know you stayed on for a significant amount
I stayed
of time.
on, right? Yeah. So three of us. So one of the older gentlemen chose to
Right
stay
off.
for a little while
Okay.
and then head off. Which in retrospect, it was interesting. I mean, if I were to sell again at this age, that might be my decision too. Or just say, look, I've got enough, and I'm going to go off and do other things that interest me. I stayed on. I moved my family to Tampa, and I stayed on and served in two different roles. I was the chief strategy officer and the chief marketing officer, which I joke, why be bad at one thing when you can be worse at two of them? But that was fascinating. One of my co-founders became the chief digital officer.
Okay.
And ultimately, the entity was a $2 billion call center, NASDAQ listed.
He was only the chief of one thing?
Only one thing. Only one thing.
That's
right?
a disconnect. What are they doing?
Exactly. And
Wow.
so anything he achieved really should be diminished as a result. So
You look at it through a different lens, at least.
That's right. Please clip that part so I can send this to him. But yeah, so we stayed on. I stayed on for about 2.5 years. He stayed on for a little bit longer. Our friend who was the sales executive stayed on for about as long as he did. And it was, what a fascinating journey, partly because of external factors, right? COVID made everything weird.
Yeah.
So that was that was one element of it. But it was going from this 350 person organization to a 55,000 person organization, privately owned, NASDAQ listed, and just the scale and the scope and just fitting into someone else's culture, joining a proud organization that had been operating for 43 years. There were, and what did serve us well, I think to your point earlier, is we'd all been part of larger organizations. So this wasn't foreign that we were joining a large organization. We got it. We understood that there were functional heads and cultures and agendas and personalities. And so it probably made it quite a bit easier for us to join. And again, back to the leadership, and the CEO specifically was who became my direct boss, was just a great individual. He was a truly lovely person who cared a lot about his team, cared a lot about communication. We had all sorts of great discussions where he would articulate his vision for the organization and where we were going. And so I really benefited a great deal from that relationship and from him.
So it sounds like a great experience while you were there. A lot of lessons learned and a lot of opportunity. You were given 6 to 8 jobs at any given time.
Exactly.
A lot of titles, which is kind of fancy.
Yeah.
So what was it that compelled you to leave and move on?
Sort of the time became right. I think it was going to be wrapped up anyway, so sort of wrapped it up, and then I went into early retirement for a little while, which is a very weird experience.
Yeah.
Just because, especially when you're an entrepreneur, work is your hobby and your hobby is your work.
Right.
It is everything about you. It is what you do. It's what you think of at night and in the morning. It's what you talk to your wife about, which she's thrilled about all the time. She's always asked me to tell her more about work.
Yeah, exactly. Give me more of your problems at work.
Exactly. Do tell me all about what you're doing. And so it was my everything. And so I found new ways to stay engaged in it. I spent a few years doing sort of more creative outlet activities. And I created a lot of online learning courses on the topic areas. I co-authored 2 books. I started a YouTube channel and started filming myself with cool cameras like you have. So things like that, and also investing in startups, advising startups, um, just because I don't know how to play golf. And this is my hobby. I really did enjoy the innovation space, AI in general. I enjoyed sharing my experiences and helping people out, and so that's what I continued to do even when I wasn't gainfully employed by anybody.
So we talk a lot about on this podcast the notion of purpose and identity. And a lot of business owners, they've created an identity around their work persona,
yes,
right? And think of so you didn't own the business for 40 years. We have a lot of clients who do.
right,
And they start in their early 20s and they think of themselves as John Smith, the owner of an
yes,
ABC corporation. And when they sell that business, they're selling not just the business, but their identity because
yes,
they've never figured out a personal identity.
yep,
Their identity is their business identity. And so much so that like when they get calls to come to the gala, it's always because of the ownership of the business or that donation to the silent auction or the sponsorship of the baseball team, the Little
yes,
League team, right?
yes,
And that's where the source of all their friendships and all of their relationships function within this identity, which they are now selling.
yes.
And so talk a bit about what you experienced. Now, again, you didn't have that typical experience where you started at 22 and you sold it at 57,
Right.
but still your work is a big part of who you are. Now you're not necessarily working 9 to 5 or 7 to 11.
Right. So
PM.
it's an interesting one because you choose it by starting the company, but you don't necessarily choose to be the founder. You are the founder, and then the organization makes you the founder.
Right.
So we saw that in so much as we had 4 founders, and none of, I mean, we were all pretty low key about it. We appreciated the role that we played. We loved the family that we built, and I know that it's a little cheesy to call them families these days, but it very much was. Our company was our family. We cared deeply about these folks, and I'm still friends with so many of them, still in touch with them. But we were the founders, and so that was how they described us. That's like the pictures in the company newsletters, and they wanted to do founder things in the company we've gone on to start today too. They have. Yeah, they choose to position the founders as a personality in the organization, right? And so it comes at you, and so that's who you are, and you take the role very seriously. And so you're right. So it is. I imagine if you do this for decade upon decade, then you really do take on that sort of that parental responsibility and that role, and it also just the status element too can go to your head in good ways and bad, but you are that. I will say what is interesting is when I did sell and I had a period of time where I was entertaining things, what it does do to you is it makes it almost impossible for you to join anything else as anything else.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there were all sorts of opportunities to join as like a head of sales or to be a strategic something or a key role, and there is an ego element to not being able to join another, especially if it's a small or medium sort of startup business, if you want the founder, just because you're so used to being the founder that you almost are constrained in your options. Either you advise, invest, et cetera, which is fine. Your background is that you were a founder, so you're bringing that context to the table, or you start another thing. Because going back to a big BPO and seeing if I can get a sales job just wouldn't compute. I don't know that they'd ever want me. But that aside, assuming I could fool someone into hiring me, I don't know that I could adjust and really embrace that role anymore, just because of the roles I've played.
It is hard to go back. I can't imagine going into sort of like, being a mid-level salesperson all of a sudden.
Right. And, not to say there's anything wrong with it. It just, again, and especially to your point of if you have been the founder for a decade, that's your lot in life. That's what you are, and it's very important to you. And so I can see that it's probably why I took so many, not many, many years, but so many years between last startup and this current one, just because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Yeah, I get it. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, I know. I'm still not sure, but here we are.
So you spent a lot of time in thought leadership, a lot of time in and around AI, and it seems like a full circle sort of moment based upon where you started in robotics and automation, and this is sort of like the more contemporary version of that. Can you talk about those parallels a little bit?
It's all parallels. Literally every ounce of it is a parallel, in so much as 12 years ago, it was the use of software to emulate the work that people were doing in operations to make transactional processes more efficient. And at the time, the technology was more brittle, I suppose. It was more deterministic. If this, then that. If X, then Y. You could program it that way. This modern set of AI capabilities is a little bit more creative. It can do sort of the non-deterministic. It can find patterns in data. It can sort of fill gaps. It can look at documents it's never seen before and make sense of them. But the underlying elements are exactly the same. And actually, the underlying barriers to success are exactly the same. 12 years ago, a lot of people have stopped using the terminology that we used. So robotic process automation, you don't hear it anymore, mostly because people said, well, we tried it and it didn't work. It was never the robotic process automation that didn't work.
Right.
It was the fact that, and we talk a lot about this now, it's readiness pillars. It's you weren't ready and you didn't do the foundational work that was useful no matter what you're doing next, which is you had no process clarity and documentation. Your data was absolute dumpster fire. You had the wrong or a inherited legacy tech stack that's confusing and sparking and barely getting the job done. Talent is a question as to who is on the team, either internally or brought in from partnerships outside, and then governance and the way that you actually pursue any of these initiatives. None of that was in place very well before. It's why all those automation projects failed. And with this wave, we're so enamored by the power of this AI and so pushed by, in this case, a lot of investment firms, a lot of executive leadership, a lot of boards are shoving this concept of we must be AI first and we must just AI ourselves onto operations, that none of those foundational steps are being really performed to the degree that they need to. So yes, all parallels. It's literally, it's second verse, same as the first, which is what compelled me to get back into the race again, because other than the tech being cooler, no doubt the tech is cooler and it can do a lot of really interesting things. It's irrelevant if the foundation stones aren't there, and none of that story has changed from 12 years ago.
So I'd love to hear it within the sort of framework or context of a business owner.
Right.
In the lower middle market, the middle market, what would be the foundational steps that they can take before they go and start creating an AI strategy?
Yes. And it's actually, this I'll add to that too, because I thought about this on the drive over here, but we talk a lot about AI readiness. And so everyone is right. I'm just with my cool cameras at home, just putting the finishing touches on an AI academy that we're developing. And one of the punchlines of it is everyone is talking about being AI first. And so the punchline is that AI first is an ambition, AI ready is a plan. And the idea that you really do need to do the work, and why I think it's interesting is because AI ready is also in many cases exit ready. It's putting rigor into a business where you, in many cases, just haven't had time, right? Like if we had more time, we'd sit down and document how we do what we do. So it's not just in the heads of a few folks who bring heroism and tenacity to work every day, but if they, and the joke is it's either a bus or a lottery. If they get hit by a bus or they win the lottery, we lose that experience and skill, and then we're in trouble.
And you can't scale heroism and tenacity. I mean, you can't scale that.
That's right. And so many organizations, and honestly, regardless of size, because we saw this in the Fortune 1000s. I see this every day now in working with mid-tier and smaller businesses, is that when you talk to them about simply, and we always start with process, but when you talk to them about process documentation and just, do you know how you do what you do today? And is it written down? It is not. Just I'll bet good money that in most cases it's not. Or if it has been written down, it was a while ago. It's not complete. It doesn't capture all the exceptions, et
Yeah.
cetera. And it's not important to document that just so that you know how you do what you do today. But it's virtually impossible to re-engineer and build this blueprint for where you're going if you can't start with where you are. Because, again, simple analogies, but I liken it to if you've got a plot of land and you hire a foreman and you've got the concrete guys and the carpenters and you just bring them all there and you say, we need to build a building here right now. And they say, great, can we see a blueprint? And you say, we don't have time for it. Just start right now. Just pour the foundation wherever you think, and like the load-bearing wall, just start to put it up.
Just eyeball it.
Right. And so without a doubt, within 2 weeks, you're going to discover the foundation's in the wrong place. The load-bearing walls are not what you need. They're in the wrong place. All this, and so why are you doing that to yourself? So ultimately, businesses of any size, to start by understanding that sometimes it's boring. It certainly is, but that process documentation, mapping what you are today,
right,
so that you are in a position to have a re-engineering discussion about what you can be tomorrow.
Yes,
powered by what technology enables you to dream, right? Because then you can actually look at how do frontier models and deterministic automation and offshore labor and anything else that you can bring to the equation, how can that help you to transform your business and grow in a nonlinear manner where you're not counting on each new sort of head on the team to do the work for you? But if you don't start there, then you're pouring foundations and building load-bearing walls randomly, and that will lead us to this next wave, which will be just like the last wave, which is we tried RPA, it didn't work. We tried AI agents and they didn't work. And that will be yet another AI winter. We've had multiple. AI is a 70-year-old concept.
Yeah.
And it's never because of the technology.
Yes, this strikes me as someone who came out of B school 26 years ago, into consulting, as something that's as old as time, like the notion of going in and sort of mapping out a current state process, mapping out a future state process, doing the gap analysis to get from A to B, and going out and talking to the users and building user requirements, right? To try and understand what we're trying to solve for today. This is my wife's one of the best CRM consultants on the planet. It has been since the 90s. Okay. So this has been ingrained in me through her, not just through my own experiences.
There you go. And that's boring and old and slow and right.
And correct. Exactly. And the only right answer.
Well, because, and especially today, if you look at the Silicon Valley really funded narrative, it's all around this concept of a forward deployed engineer. So everyone's really giddy about these FDEs. And a forward deployed engineer is some parts that it's actually putting an AI engineer in your business to sit down next to your practitioner and say, so what do you do? How do you onboard a new client or customer? How do you pay an invoice? That's half of the game. That's what we did 12 years ago too. But they're there not to map it currently and then re-engineer it. They're there basically to pave cow paths. They're to look at what you're doing and then throw it into an LLM, and then look what you're doing, throw it into an LLM, because their sole purpose is to deploy. They're there to deploy licenses of whatever tool they're associated with.
Right.
And that's why you see, Blackstone and Goldman standing up an Anthropic forward deployed consultancy. That's why you see OpenAI standing up the deployment company. The name of the company is the deployment company, not the re-engineering or the transformation or the redesign company, the deployment company.
Make your business better.
I am here to deploy our software into your operation.
And hopefully it fixes something. Maybe.
And you are inferring from it that it will fix something, but will it? Who knows? I don't know. I'm just here to just dump this stuff into your business. And so it sounds a little slower. It sounds a little antiquated and boring. But if you don't do those fundamentals, then we're going to end up in an era where people tried Grok, they tried Anthropic, they tried OpenAI, they tried Google AI, they tried on and on and on. And the results won't manifest. Not because the technology wasn't really cool and quite capable, it's because they didn't do the pre-work. They didn't
Right.
get themselves ready. And so any business in the mid-tier to do that process mapping, modeling, understanding how they do what they do, which in many cases, again, if you started by cutting your own business cards and you started at the beginning, you at one point touched basic processes, but you haven't in a while.
Right.
And so I have some very funny stories of working with mid-tier business owners. One of my earliest clients actually said to me, she said, "There's nothing you can tell me about my business I don't already know." And then we went and we worked with some of her transactional experts, and we would bring back stories that just she actually this is 12 years ago, and I
Yeah.
spoke to her last week, and she relayed one of those stories back because she still remembered it.
Yeah.
That it was so funny the way that this employee was solving a problem, and she had no idea. And so, in many cases, you've got hardworking people who are just trying to get their job done, and they're doing weird workarounds, and they're
Yeah.
they're just keeping the lights on and keeping the processes moving. If you don't stop to study and understand it, then you're in no position to agentify it and transform it. So
This strikes me as really interesting, this sort of notion of skipping the foundation build, because it's a second version of this. And I've had this conversation so many times, but a totally different version of it.
Okay.
So my biggest fear with AI is that you're sort of skipping a lot of steps. So folks like myself, the young versions of me have to go out there, they go to Goldman and they stare at a screen for 120 hours a week, and they
Yes.
model and they bang their head against the wall for 10 years.
Mhm.
And that creates the scar tissue and the learning, and it's the doing of all that creates that next generation of leadership, that
Yes.
next VP, that next MD.
Mhm.
They're forged in fire.
Yes.
I don't know how you manufacture the next generation of MDs if they haven't gone through that path. So you're skipping the foundation build.
Yes.
And now you're trying to figure out, how do we get these kids to that point where when they're 40 years old, they are monsters.
Yes.
They know how to do all that stuff down below when they haven't had to do it.
Right.
They just prompt, because I can right now, I can figure out a cost of capital. I know what a weighted average cost of capital is for a lot of businesses, because I know what the cost of debt is.
Yes.
I know I can figure out the cost of equity on most businesses because I've been doing it for a long time.
Mhm.
I plug it into ChatGPT or any of these things, and I can iterate my way to a DCF evaluation,
Mhm.
discounted cash flow,
Yep.
really quickly.
Yes.
I mean, in minutes.
But what's missing is instinct and anecdote.
100%. So if I haven't done it myself, like I had to back 25 years ago,
Right.
where it took me 40 hours to
Yes.
build out that model.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
that's why I can do it so quickly now, and that I can do it effectively now, because I know the inputs.
Yes.
If you don't know if you haven't gone through all that, I don't know how yes, you're skipping a lot of steps. Yes, you're getting competent work done.
Mhm.
I don't know how you manufacture that next generation when they haven't gone through all the steps.
I completely agree. We saw this 12 years ago because, again, in outsourcing, I'll try to make a long story
No, please.
somewhat palatably short. But in outsourcing, so when I was at Capgemini in their BPO practice,
Sure.
and we were part of their big deal sales team, and many of the members of this team with me had cut their teeth on transaction floors. They had done finance and accounting, like matching invoices and bills of lading and shipping. Like, they knew the stuff because they had done the stuff.
Right.
And then they worked up. I came in from consulting, so I would joke that I didn't know how to spell F&A, but they did because they had done it. And then they worked their way up, and then they were team leads, and then they were like operational leads, and then they progressed up to then moving over into, and then we were working on moving that work to India. And so we would move that work to India. And so then what you had was a young Indian kid who would start from the bottom
Yeah.
and cut his teeth on it and match this and that and learn, and then become a team lead, and then become an operational lead, and then become a head of a division. And so you would see that person. And so we would have this discussion all the time, is we're removing that bottom layer and handing it to automation. Where's the team lead coming from in the future?
Great question.
And what do they know, and what do they bring to the table? Because they don't have the instinct. They don't have the empathy because they
Yeah.
hadn't done it themselves
Yeah.
before. And so, yes, there's the argument that we all use calculators and we don't need to do the math ourselves, but we understand some of the underlying.
Yeah,
We've
the
actually
mechanics, we
we've
know.
been taught the mechanics.
Yeah.
But in operations, it's a very complex art, always. You know that. So if you haven't lived through those scenarios and it's just now being done for you, at you, we could fast forward to an environment where you have middle managers and senior leadership who are completely sort of just distanced from the actual work that's going on. They don't have any of those instincts anymore. So it's I think in our new startup is a real play on the concept of AI agents and human agents working together. I think that hybrid is the only sustainable approach. Is you need to figure out how to enable humans and supercharge them and augment them, but if your goal is to work towards a future state where there are no humans, I don't think that's going to serve you well in the long term.
Agreed, yeah.
Any size business.
I agree.
Because you lose that instinct, you lose that leadership, you lose the empathy, you lose the fact that you were still probably selling products and services to humans.
Yes.
And we want to deal with each other.
We do. No doubt about it. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground on the technology, which I knew we would based upon your background. And obviously, I'm a technologist, as you can tell. So I know you've been a podcaster for a lot longer than me. I've been doing this for 2.5 months, actually. So you've been doing it for many years.
Sweet digs, good voice, great topic. So
well, the topics are easy because I just bring in great guests who can tell a compelling story as we talked about earlier.
I have to agree with that statement. Then that is very self-serving. Yes, great guests,
great guests,
and you do
today.
have great guests because I have watched prior shows in preparation for this, and
thank you.
And they were intimidatingly great. So thank you for slumming it down to me.
I'll tell you,
I appreciate being here.
You're a great storyteller, as you said, that was your role, and you're very good at it. So, if you were sitting in my chair and you had someone who was a business owner who maybe sold their business or considering selling their business,
right?
What's the one question that you would want to ask them? And I'm going to take this question and ask it to someone else down the road.
Good question. I ultimately, if they're about to sell their business, ask them what their long-term life goal is. Right? Where do they find? What's the word I'm looking for? Just the passion. Where do they find the reward for what? In purpose. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Because in many cases, they derive it from the work that they're doing, and they should stay somehow attached to it. In others, if they want to go and sail the world, then outstanding. They can do that. But I think that needs to be behind any sort of decision as far as it can't just be, obviously financially, that motivates a lot of things, and that's very important, and it frees you up and enables you to just know that you can pay for your kids' college or pay the mortgage, what have you. But it leaves you somewhat lonely and unsure of what to do next if you don't know what your real passion and purpose is. And I think I say that from personal experience. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, and ultimately I realized I really liked doing what I did last.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to do that again.
Do it again.
But I think it's an important question to ask of why are you doing this, and does it enable you to be who you want to be and do more of what you find the most energy and purpose from?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if there's a topic that comes up almost more than any other topic in discussions on this podcast, and it's not necessarily from like a question like this, but anywhere within the framework of a conversation, it's purpose.
Yes.
It's purpose over happiness.
Yes.
I've heard that so many times. I totally agree, because happiness is so ephemeral. You wake up, you feel good, you get a good workout in, and the endorphins are firing, and you feel great. And then you get to someone cuts you off in traffic, and you feel terrible, and you're not happy anymore, right? Because it's so fleeting, right? And happiness goes up and down, up and down. It's a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose is there all the time. You wake up, and you're like you're driven to do this thing,
right?
To bring something into this world every single day. That's purpose, and that is not ephemeral. It's the opposite. It's everlasting.
Right. And it's
ubiquitous.
It's funny what you said that stood out to me is someone cuts you off in traffic. Once you sell, you find yourself sitting at home all the time. So it's very rare that you find yourself in traffic. And so
it's a blessing to be in. Thank you for cutting me off.
Yeah, exactly.
A real experience.
It's nice to be able to put shoes on and leave the building.
Pants. You wanted to say pants. You could,
but that's right. That's right. And so yes, you do find yourself you leave you leave for not friends behind because they're still your friends, but you leave this community. And I even found this actually, this is, I'll answer a question you didn't ask, but
Great.
when we sold to this larger business and I was moved into the C-suite, the rest of the company that I had just built and moved into this larger business effectively treated it as if I was leaving, right? Because I was moving a position and I was going to go work for
Yeah.
the CEO,
Interesting.
and they sort of treated it as if I was gone now, and that was weird to me because I didn't feel like I was going anywhere because we're all part of the same thing, and I'll see you all as often as I did before.
See at the water cooler.
And they were right, and I was wrong.
Oh.
In that I had a whole new group of stakeholders. I had a whole new responsibility, and so I didn't get to spend the same amount of time with them, and I missed them dearly. And to this day, we're still, I mean, we're all still in touch, and I care greatly about them, and I celebrate each one of their successes and marvel at the heights they've all gone on to achieve in their own careers. But you miss them. And so that's another thing is you, if you are as married to your work as I have been traditionally, that's your social structure as well, which perhaps is a sad commentary on myself, and I should join some clubs or something. But it's a lot more than just work.
It is.
And so to truly appreciate that and understand, back to purpose, where do you get your purpose and what do you want to do next? Do you want to find yourself able to volunteer your time and contribute to local organizations, spend time with your kids, sports or school or what have you, but find those things because you'll need to. Otherwise, you sit at home binge watching Netflix and doom scrolling TikTok, which thankfully, well, I do a lot of TikTok doom scrolling, but it's because it's so darn compelling.
There you go.
And there's great stories, but not because I have other things to do too. But yeah, and that's why I had advised startups and invested in others, is it was just a chance to stay in it and to work with others who also were bad at measuring risk and were bold and wanted to build things and do interesting, sort of game changing, sort of denting of the universe sorts of activities.
Yeah. That's great. Well, that's awesome that you found that purpose.
Yeah,
for sure. So you've imparted a lot of wisdom today. We certainly appreciate that. If you were to come up with your closing remarks, that's the name of the podcast, for a business owner, for their spouse, for their centers of influence, those who advise them every day, what would be that one piece of sort of parting guidance you'd want to leave them with?
So we had an advisor through our fundraising process, both the first time we raised and then when we ultimately sold instead of raised. And that what was so eye-opening about that advisor is that while we thought they were going to just instruct us about fundraising and organizational structure and governance and leadership and everything else, brought in our spouses into the discussion. And that surprised me, and then really impressed me, I suppose, in so much as they were talking about why you raise the first round, why you raise the second round. And ultimately it was to create a degree of peace at home and to show that what you were working for created some sort of value that you were able to support and to care for your family members, this generation, and perhaps others if you're lucky. And so that really impressed me when they brought it up, and I think about it to this day, is that entrepreneurship is not a singular activity.
It's a team sport. It
is a team sport.
Yeah.
And both if you're lucky enough to have a spouse by your side who's supporting you, even if that spouse rolls their eyes at you every time you bring up work, they are supporting you in ways that you can and cannot articulate. And then the other thing I think now I take quite seriously is the act of being an example. So when I started that last company and sold it, my children were too young to know what I was doing. They were very young, and I traveled all the time, and I missed them like crazy, and they were very excited to see me come home, which my children are not as excited to see me come home.
That's kind of how it works.
Yeah, teenagers, but they didn't. I mean, osmotically, perhaps they picked up some of the elements of work ethic and communication. But if you were to ask them when they were younger, I think their description was that dad talks on the phone all the time. That was my job.
Yeah.
This time around, I've got teenagers, and I sort of build out loud as much as I can, so as to be an example for them. Whatever they go on to be is, I just want them to be happy and successful at what they do. But the chance to do it in a way that exhibits it for them, that they may choose a path based on what they're watching me do, would just be cool, frankly. And so I guess those are my two closing remarks. Is one, this isn't a solo sport. This is an individual sport. You were very much a team, everyone around you. And two, think about the examples and the sort of the training and just sort of the experiences that you are living that could impact others. Because I think whether it's with your own kids or with groups that you volunteer with or other, there's a lot you're doing that I think is valuable and interesting for them to learn from and take away from.
Yeah, this has been valuable and interesting, certainly for me, and I'm sure for our audience. So I want to thank you for coming on again, Ian.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a great time.
Yeah.
And remember, in business and in life, the best outcomes aren't found; they're built. Far too many business owners go into the most impactful financial transaction of their lives with both arms tied behind their backs. That's because they're operating at a severe disadvantage. Most business owners sell precisely one time, once. So not only do they not know the answers, in many cases, they don't know the questions to ask. And that isn't their fault. M&A has a language of its own, and no one has made a mission of ensuring business owners are as informed as their advisors and the buyer on the other side of the transaction. Until now. This podcast exists to serve that gap. But we can only fulfill our mission if this show finds those who could most benefit from its content. So please help us find those people. If you like this podcast, let us know. And let the world know. Hit the like button. Tell us what you learned in an episode or what you want us to cover next. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it. Help us close that gap.